Hey, welcome to episode number 5 of the Go-To Physio Show. Coming up in today's show, we talk all about the difference between a problem versus a diagnosis and the benefits that it has to focus on the problem rather than a diagnosis. We've also got Carl Morris coming back, showing you some strategies to use if you feel that your patient has lost confidence in you as a therapist. In addition to that, we've got our lit review, and we've also got the build your business to help you build your private practice so it becomes that go-to physio. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, so welcome back to episode 5 of the Go-To Physio Show. Now, on the last Build Your Business segment, I touched on something of a problem versus a diagnosis. And that's what I want to go through this week in helping you get the confidence and clarity to deal with any patient that comes through the door so that you've got the potential to truly become that go-to physio. Okay? Now, that go-to physio, it takes hard work, it takes dedication, but it's having the confidence and the clarity to help even the most complex patients, and especially the more complex cases. This information this week is going to be very, very powerful for you. So when we get through our subjective and our objective assessment, you're actually explaining to the patient the problem. A lot of therapists have almost got into the habit of saying a diagnosis. Okay, I think you have got X. Okay, then what does that do? Okay, and I want you to think back to episode 2 with Carl Morris. What does that do to the person's attention? Where do we take that person's attention with our explanation? Okay, so I think you've got subacromial bursitis. I think you've got a bulging discs. Okay, and I hope you're not saying that. Okay, I think you've got a ATFL grade 2 sprain. I think you've got a blah 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 blah. Okay, so the second I say that, and the second I say bulging disc, what are you thinking about? Where does your attention go? Okay? Versus you tell the person the problem, okay? And if you think back to episode 1, 80% of our focus is on what we think has caused the problem. 20% of our time and our attention is focusing on the actual symptoms. Okay? So what we can do is somebody that's got knee pain, okay? What I do personally is I am going to tell them what the problem is, and usually that area of the body I'm talking about is completely away from the knee. So I'll say something along the lines of, and again, it's very, very hard when the patient's not in front of you and you can't relate it to their story, but first and foremost to say, okay, Betsy, the reason you have your knee pain here, I think, is because these tissues aren't contributing enough, okay, which is causing the quadriceps to actually do a very, very good job, which is putting excessive pressure through the knee joint, okay? And the first thing as well that I will try add in, even before I say that, is, you know what, Betsy, I think your knee is actually doing a really, really good job for you. Do you know what, Betsy, I think your lower back's doing a really, really good job for you. Because what happens when you say that? Okay, you completely change their belief system about their back. Okay, so they've got this belief system that their back is weak, their back is fragile, their back is made of glass. Okay, there's a problem with their knee, they're pissed off, they're annoyed with their knee, etc. Okay, but all of a sudden you've told them that low back or that knee is actually the hero in the story. Okay, and again, episode 2, understand the power of the story. Okay, very, very useful. Okay, the low back is the hero in the story. That's changing their perception automatically of that low back actually thinking it's a bad guy to actually being the good guy. Okay, but then what we're going to do is we're going to tell them how to solve this problem. Okay, so the knee isn't your problem, Betsy. Your low back isn't your problem. Your low back's doing a great job. The problem is, Betsy, this area of your body or this area of your body isn't helping your low back enough. So everything you're doing at the moment, you're using your low back. Okay, when you go to bend, to touch your toes, your low back your poor low back doesn't get a break. It doesn't get a rest. It can't relax. Okay? We get these other tissues to do their job. We get the legs to do their job. All of a sudden, the low back muscles don't have to offer you protection or stability. Okay? So it's very, very important that we focus the person's attention, okay, into the area that ultimately is going to help them get that ideal outcome. Okay? Focusing your patient's attention on a diagnosis, the first thing they're going to do, because they will not understand the word that you're going to say to them anyway, majority won't, is they're going to Google it. Okay? Then their attention is on that, versus somebody that I've said, okay, Betsy, I think your low back's doing a great job, but I think your left leg doesn't have enough intent due to that. Do you remember that old ankle injury that you had? So I don't think you're doing a great job with that. So do you remember when I asked you to do this exercise while ago and your low back hurt? Do you remember? And then I might demonstrate. Can you see how your ankle is pretty important in helping your low back in that scenario? Or like when you told me when you do your gardening, or when you go to pick up your grandkids, etc. So again, we offer proof. We show them what we found in the objective assessment, but most importantly now, their attention is going into that left ankle. Their attention is going into the part of the body where we want their attention to be. And the next thing we're going to do then is we're going to give them movement strategies, okay, to give the nervous system back an ability to tolerate load through these tissues, okay, or get them moving from parts of the body that we want them to be able to move from. So telling a person a problem versus telling someone a diagnosis is a very, very different thing completely. Okay, now the other big thing, okay, is your expectations. You expect the patient to want a diagnosis, and on my two daughters' lives, I cannot remember the last time I gave somebody a genuine diagnosis. Okay, I cannot remember the last time I've said to somebody, you have got a grade 2 hamstring, you've got this. And I don't even do that with professional sports athletes. Okay, it's too limiting. It focuses their attention on that. I tell them that exactly what caused this problem, what we need to do to solve this problem, and what we need to do to make sure that this problem never comes back again. Okay, and we give them clear and simple instructions on what they need to do. We take away all the overwhelm. We give them clarity, which is ultimately then going to allow them to take action. Okay, and that's very, very powerful, as opposed to giving someone a diagnosis and then giving them 2 or 3 exercises. Okay, so they're already overwhelmed by your diagnosis because they don't understand a few words. Any explanation that you say and the patient doesn't understand the words, the confidence level of them understanding what you're saying has just dropped massively. Okay, so that's very, very important to understand. So your explanation should not be using any words, in my opinion, that that person doesn't understand. And if you are using a word, you're going to have another explanation just for that word. Okay, whereas if you focus on the problem that ultimately is going to turn into the solution, okay, then it's a win-win. Okay, so the problem, Betsy, is in your knee. The problem is in your low back, Betsy. The problem is actually that these tissues and these tissues that we can see as a result of your story aren't doing a good enough job, which is potentially causing these tissues to overwork. Okay, so that's very, very, very powerful. Don't underestimate the power of you getting your patient's attention on where you want them to get to versus taking them down a dead end. Okay, and I think it's a lot of therapists, they overlook the implications of their actual explanation of the problem. Okay, so most patients, they don't care about a diagnosis. All they care about is what the problem is, what they need to do to solve the problem, okay, and how long it's going to take. So for Betsy, for her knee, Betsy, we need to get your hamstring function a little bit better, so it gives the glute muscles a little bit of time to develop force. Okay, I wouldn't be saying it in those words to her, but I'm saying it to you as a therapist so you can understand what the message we're going to give her. If we can get these 2 tissues to do their job, then all of a sudden that quad muscle that inserts into your leg, that's going to be doing its job instead of trying to do the job of the glute and the hamstring as well. So that's why, Betsy, I'm going to give you this exercise that is going to use your hamstring and your bum muscle together. We're going to get them to coordinate a lot better. If they can coordinate a little bit better, it means your quadriceps does less. It means the messages going from those tissues up to the brain to tell your brain that there's an issue, that then will be resolved, all being well. Does that make sense? Okay, so keeping it very, very simple is the best possible way for you to get the patient buy-in, have confidence and clarity, adhere to the exercise problem, and it's going to solve a lot of your issues, okay? And a lot of the issues that therapists come to me with in my own therapist mentorship, okay? So just want to consider this week, I want you to consider your homework for this week on the Go To Physio show is to have an awareness of what you're saying to the patient when you're explaining the problem. And again, it's not your fault that if you do, give a diagnosis, etc. Okay, and again, that's your choice. But for me, it doesn't make sense if we're bringing that person's attention to that. Remember, the person most likely remembers the first thing and the last thing. The thing that happens in the middle is usually irrelevant, okay, which is usually the exercise, or they forget them, which is usually the exercises, and you tell them what they need to do, okay? Always start with the problem, okay, which is going to be the natural continuation that's going to turn into the solution, which ultimately is going to be the rehab exercise, which is then going to get them to the ideal outcome, and it's going to take usually this amount of time, okay? So I hope that helps. As always, feel free to get in touch. Any questions, any topics you want us to cover on the Go To Physio show. My ultimate goal with the Go To Physio show is to help you have the confidence and clarity to deal with any patient that comes in the door, so that you have got the ability to truly become that go-to physio to deal with any complex cases that come through your door. The Therapist Mentorship Program was put together to help you accelerate your ability to have confidence and clarity to deal with any patient that comes through the door. It's a very intimate 90-day experience where you work closely with myself and my most trusted therapists to put together very, very specific structure in your assessment, your treatment and your rehab for every single patient, so that you can truly get the results that both you and your patient deserve, so you can become that go-to therapist. If you want more information, just click on the button below this video or go to thegotofysio.com/mentorship. Okay, so in episode 5's lit review, I want to continue along with this paper now. In episode 4, we talked a lot about some of the physiological properties of muscles, and we have a few different things to continue on with and start to integrate now more into the higher centers as well. Okay, so last episode we talked about muscle spindles a lot. We also talked a little bit about the spinal cord level of how we can be more efficient. Now let's look at actually in a bit more laser-like about how that actually happens from a muscle point of view, but also how this interacts with the higher centers. So now what I want to move on to is the interaction of lower motor control and motor tasks. Okay, so we need to understand how does the muscles combine and communicate with spinal cord levels and higher centers. Okay, so neural recruitment interacts with muscle activation patterns to regulate muscle force, length and work, which affects the cost of force generation. Okay, so practically applying this, I want you to think about a patient where you may on the initial assessment have a look at how they're moving. Okay, in terms of what we're seeing in terms of cost of energy, have a look at their breathing rate, okay, the facial expressions, the energy they're using to do tasks. And then at the end of your treatment intervention, you see that movement maybe looks a bit smoother or whatever, okay, or they may say something like, I feel a lot lighter. Okay, look at the after effect of the intervention that you've put in. So what are some of the things that maybe you may be helping that person utilize a little bit better? Okay, so tendon stretch is being outlined as a key element for reducing lower motor energy cost. Therefore, muscle architecture and physiology combined with tendon geometry for specific functions. Okay, so when we can use elastic energy, we've got a massive reduction in energy costs. So that's where a lot of times clinically I'll have a patient and we help them maybe overcome muscle slack in the muscle, maybe help them utilize that muscle a little bit more energy efficiently under isometric conditions. And when we may say go for a walk or something like that, they'll always kind of feedback, yeah, I feel a lot lighter, feel a bit springier or whatever. But ultimately all we've done is we've probably helped them reduce their energy cost by using these muscles a little bit more appropriately. Okay, so changes in muscle tendon forces they can be measured using embedded force transducers. So this is more around the research that they go into this. But in a nutshell, to help you practically apply this, under concentric conditions, muscles shorten to produce mechanical work. So that's nothing new, okay? Now that's going to be important for climbing and even maybe jumping. But during hopping and running, okay, for more sports athlete, okay, muscles may contract nearly isometrically. Okay, so there is this debate whether, especially the hamstrings, are eccentrically lengthening, okay, or are they working isometrically? Okay, they're close to isometric conditions. I think most people would agree on that. I.e., they go under small length changes, okay, performing little work, but they can produce large forces. Okay, so that's a massive reduced energy cost, where they can recover elastic energy by utilizing the tendons. So you look at the medial hamstrings and just look at any anatomy book out and look at the tendons. Okay, so anywhere where you see long tendons, you want to be thinking, okay, elastic energy. Can we use these muscles under near-like isometric conditions? Okay, and that's going to be really, really important when you're designing your rehab programs. Okay, when you've got someone with an ankle sprain, when you've got someone with a syndesmosis injury, a hamstring injury, knee pain, okay, you want certain muscles to work well. Are you giving these tissues an ability to work under how their physiological properties are represented, or are you just going straight for a concentric type action, which a lot of people, a lot of therapists just tend to go to? Okay, so it's very, very important that we can start looking at our rehab choices and looking at the physiology of muscles, okay, and tendons, and seeing if our programs are actually appropriate to how these tissues have to work in real life, depending on whether that person wants to go climbing or whether they want to be successful at hopping and running, for example. Okay, so again, it's very, very important that we understand the requirements of these tissues specific to the person in front of us. Okay, so in contrast, energy absorption is achieved through eccentric contractions by active muscle lengthening, such as during landing, which is often a brief stretch prior to muscle shortening. Okay, so the relationship between muscle tendon architecture and function have therefore been revealed that short muscle fascicles with pinnate architecture are well suited to produce forces economically. Okay, along with long thin tendons providing elastic energy savings. Okay, so let's just go back to that. Short muscle fascicles with pinnate architecture are well suited to produce forces economically, with long tendons providing elastic energy. Alternatively, long muscle fascicles with absent or little tendon enhance mechanical power and positional control. Okay, so if you think about two types of muscles here, okay, so short muscle fascicles with pinnate architecture, that would be one where you would maybe look at the peroneals, okay, where you've got this long tendon going up the outside of your leg, and you've got these muscle fascicles, okay, that are quite short and they're going in at an angle. So these muscles are well suited to bracing. Okay, they're working almost isometrically throughout the day. Whereas a lot of people with ankle sprains, the majority of therapists will get, again, I don't want to paint the same brush with every therapist, but a lot of therapists, commonly you'll see they'll get the TheraBand out and they're trying to use these tissues, working these under concentric conditions, whereas actually the muscle fascicles are short and they've got a pinnate structure. So again, we want to be able to use these tissues in almost elastic energy okay, so again, these tissues are working bracing, and that makes sense because again, a lot of people, their calf raise is going to be influenced a lot by the ability of these peroneals. So again, I see a lot of people, if they've got a weak calf raise, a lot of people think that they need to do calf raises, okay? Whereas very often these tissues may display protective-like properties or protective-like behaviors of these tissues. We desensitize these tissues, we help them work under isometric conditions a little bit, and all of a sudden that calf raise comes back very, very quickly. Okay. Alternatively, long muscle fascicles with absent or little tendon enhance power and positional control. So the obvious one here is the glutes. Okay, so again, the glutes, they've got a short tendon, but they're positioned a bit more for mechanical power and positional control. Okay, so going back to the glutes, another muscle that's going to be very, very important for
elastic energy will be the hamstrings. Okay, so again, the hamstrings give the glute an opportunity to produce power, because it takes these tissues a little bit longer to produce power, okay, or to produce work. Now, biomechanical observations during locomotion have uncovered much about the principles of locomotor control, okay. So normal mechanical interactions between intrinsic muscle contractile properties, reflex feedback, and feed-forward control are key to stabilizing rapid movements. Okay, so again, feed-forward control and reflex feedback, a lot of this is happening, okay, at spinal cord level, okay, where these tissues, they're reacting to the length of the tissue, the speed at which the tissue is lengthening, and again, a lot of that's going to the spinal cord and coming back again. That is not actually going up to the higher centers, okay. And research has shown that using early isometric plantar flexor force development, okay, is advantageous, okay, in reducing energy costs. Okay, so greater muscle shortening has been shown to increase work output during incline locomotion in animals. Okay, the ability of distal limb muscles to generate muscle forces isometrically or with low shortening velocities reduces mechanical work and subsequent metabolic energy costs. While running over complex terrains, guinea fowls achieve stabilization from the intrinsic properties of distal muscle tendon structures in combination with limb and body dynamics described by the spring mass model. Okay, now appreciate, yeah, the purest, so it's all animals, yeah, ideal world. Yeah, we'd be able to study all this stuff with human tissues. But if you look at the architecture, you get out your anatomy book, you're going to see long tendons distally. You're going to see very, very little long tendons proximally. Okay, so again, have a look at the glute max, have a look at the glute med tendons, have a look at the medial hamstring tendons, have a look at the Achilles tendon. Okay, so again, what they're saying here makes sense. Okay. In terms of it makes sense in terms of how the architecture is set up. So practically, what are we going to see here with somebody who's maybe not using efficient movement strategies? Okay, are they using extra energy to do work? Okay, so when I talk about energy efficiency, that's what I'm talking about. Can we get that person to move with less energy costs? Okay, and for someone in back pain, that's going to be someone who can get up and down off a chair, who can walk without having to huff and puff and use extra energy. Okay, so now that their breathing is going to be a lot less heavy, okay, their mind might be a little bit more clear, then that may contribute to their pain experience. Okay, now again, we have to treat these tissues depending on the person's needs. Okay, but if I can get the distal tissues to work more efficiently, that person may be able to transfer energy efficiently or more efficiently. Okay, they're not going to have to use their respiratory system as much, okay, because their heart rate isn't elevating. Is that all going to contribute to maybe desensitizing that pain experience? Possibly. Okay, so this is where we actually have to look at previous injuries and getting that person movement more efficient. This can have a massive impact, not just on sport athletes, but people with persistent pain too, because then they're going to feel, actually, you know what, going for a walk isn't such a chore after all. I can actually walk without my breath being lost, and my heart rate skyrocketing after a few steps. Okay, but the key thing here as well is isometric plantar flexor force development. So I always talk about intent through that foot, okay, and not having intent through that foot and giving back intent through that foot is very, very important. Now, distal muscles appear to transmit forces using elastic energy storage in tendons, with proximal muscles show more complex recruitment in vivo. Okay, so again, how we're going to use our hip versus how we're going to use the distal tissues. If you want to recruit the hamstrings and the gastroc, you may want to think about using different strategies compared to maybe something with the hip. Okay, but ideally we want to utilize all these tissues together, okay, to help coordination. So locomotion speed also plays a role in the ability of higher brain centers to maintain stability. At faster speeds, spinal sensory motor circuits must work in concert with the biomechanical properties of the musculoskeletal system to maintain stability due to transmission delays from higher level neural control centers. So what this basically is saying is that when the speed movement increases, that we don't have time to process all the information up to the higher centers, and higher centers control everything. So we need to be able to utilize everything at various levels. Okay, so it's very, very important that the biomechanical properties of the tissues are able to be utilized effectively along with the spinal cord, along with the higher centers. Okay, so it's not all about the brain. We need these peripheral tissues to do their job as well. Okay, so if we can improve muscle force predictions, okay, again, basically getting these tissues to do their job, feed forward control, that's going to buy us time for the central information to be driven from the peripheral tissues to the spinal cord level and get that information back to actually influence our movement. Okay, so we have a thing as well called preflexes, which are zero delay muscle contractions. Okay, and again, they're very, very minimal force production, but what they do is they buy a little bit of time for that reflexive contraction to kick in. Okay, so basically what I want you to take away from this paper, as we're just going on a little bit here, is that it's not all about the nervous system, okay? It's not, or should I say, it's not all about the higher centers in the brain with movement, that we want the peripheral tissues to be able to do their job as well. The peripheral tissues are very, very important in contributing to movement efficiency, okay? But we have to put these tissues in positions that give the whole system, the peripheral tissues, the nervous system, the spinal cord level, the higher centers, an opportunity to work together, coordinate the movements, solve problem tasks, and ultimately make that person more energy efficient, okay, so that they can do the same task with less energy expenditure. That's going to help their heart rate, it's going to help their breathing rate, then hopefully that's going to help get them back into rest and digest. And that then is going to make a massive difference also to their pain experience. So someone with persistent pain, I still very much want to get them moving more efficiently with more energy efficiency, just as much as I do a professional athlete. Okay, so I hope that was useful. The rest of this paper goes into stuff probably a little bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but it's well worth a read. This paper, as I said, there's some really good stuff that's kind of reviewed the research over the last 20 years, and it's broken down in a way that can help you start to get a better understanding of movement, about the complexities of movement, but in a way that's a little bit easier to understand.
The Therapist Mentorship Program was put together to help you accelerate your ability to have confidence and clarity with any patient that comes through the door. It's a very intimate 90-day experience where you work closely with myself and my most trusted therapists to put together a very, very specific structure in your assessment, your treatment and your rehab for every single patient, so that you can truly get the results that both you and your patient deserve, so you can become that go-to therapist. If you want more information, just click on the button below this video or go to thegotofysio.com/mentorship. So welcome to this week's segment of Build Your Business. Now this week I want you to start to reflect on what you're actually tracking in your private practice. Are you tracking how many new patients you have a week? Are you tracking how many cancellations you've had? How many sessions it's taken to help people? So the reason I'm saying this is once you start to have a look at your stats, that's going to give you a very good focus, okay, on where you need to go next. And very often those stats can actually help us clinically as well. Okay, so if you're having a lot of cancellations and a lot of drop-offs, okay, in terms of patients that have come into you with the hope of getting an ideal result or an ideal outcome, and you haven't been able to help them get that, then are we actually tracking how many of those patients have actually dropped off? How many patients have you discharged? We want to celebrate those, but the patients that have dropped off, there's always lessons to be learned in that, both clinically and financially. Okay, so that's my big tip for you this week, is to start tracking the amount of drop-offs that you have in your business. Okay, and then ask yourself the question, why has this person dropped off? Okay, now if you feel that that person needed another session or two, okay, even if their pain has resolved massively, but you feel that they need that session or two to build that resilience, and they have dropped off, then ask yourself the question why. Okay, and just asking yourself the question why, you'll process answers and you'll start to come up with answers. And that's a great tool clinically as well for you. What areas of your structured step-by-step system do you have to improve on most next in order to get the biggest bang for your buck? Okay, so there's two benefits this week. There's both a clinical and a business benefit of actually starting to track the number of patients that you're seeing, the number of patients that you're successfully discharging, but also the number of patients that are dropping off from getting that ideal result. Because if that number is high, that's going to be very, very hard to build that go-to physio practice, because those patients potentially, okay, may not be referring you, okay, or spreading that raving fans word of mouth about your practice, okay? Whereas the more people we get to the discharge, we achieve their ideal outcome, we make meaningful impacts in their lives, then the better chance you have of getting that word of mouth referral strategy, okay? The faster you're going to be able to build your business, the faster you're going to be able to become that go-to private practice. As always, reflect, work smarter, not harder, both clinically and also in your business. Okay, I'll see you next time on the Build Your Go-To Private Practice Physio segment on the Go-To Physio Show.
I wanted a new way of looking at the body and understanding how it moves, and getting further than just thinking this muscle might be a little bit weak and we have to strengthen it in isolation. So I felt that the mentorship produced a kind of more rounded approach, especially from start to finish. So there's like all the stuff that you can do on the bed, and then there's all the stuff you can do on the field as well, right up to the end, especially because I want to work with the athletes as much as possible. It was incredible, actually. I was really surprised at how active Dave was in the Facebook groups, and if you emailed or private messaged him as well, he got back to you as soon as possible. Other people in the group as well, I liked the way they would chip in with any sort of cases that people had and wanted help with, so very good. A lot of information, and it's broken down really well, and it's kind of drip fed to you through the year, which really helped me keep on top of it and fit it in around other things. And then just the amount of new material that sort of just made sense that I wasn't getting from other locations, but I kind of felt like there was something missing in my education, so it really helped to plug in those gaps. Really helped me get kind of still faster results with some people, and a lot more confident that what I'm doing can actually, it is going to get somewhere and it's going to be quite effective. Make sure you get into one of the talks with Dave if you're unsure, because you'll go through the whole system and you'll really know where you might actually benefit a lot from it, because I think there's something for everyone in it as well. I think it's a new way of thinking.
Okay, so welcome to this week's Brain Booster. Carl, thanks for joining us again. We've just had a question come in from Debbie, and Debbie's asked, how do you, or have you got any advice, Carl, when a patient seems to be losing confidence in you as a therapist?
I think one of the big things is to create a very, very clear picture of a potential future that engages them. A future that's full of hope. I think what can happen is we can get lost in the day-to-day moment, if you like, that we don't seem to be making much progress. So I think when you use good questions and create a future that gives people energy. Because I use the sat-nav analogy, is that when you give a sat-nav a very clear direction, the sat-nav will go to work. It will do whatever necessary to get you to your destination. In the physio world, if we've got a very clear destination, why is it so important to get the knee right? Why is it? What is the benefit of that going to be in the future? When you can help your client create that very, very clear vision of a future of possibility, then they're much more likely to stick to the program and stick with the protocol that you're giving them.
Exactly. So just to sum up that from a practical term, from a physio point of view, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what Carl is saying is if that person's attention, like we've talked about, is on the end goal, then you should be just the guide to get them there, like we've talked about in episode 2. Whereas if they're starting to lose confidence in you, then what is their attention on? Okay, so again, Carl's covered in previous.
And I would even reframe it for the physio themselves. It's not so much that they haven't got confidence in you, it's just that their attention has wandered to a useless place.
Exactly. That's absolutely brilliant, and that will help so many therapists out there. And you know, it is frustrating. It is, you know, you can get angry, you can get frustrated, you can feel inadequate sometimes. Whereas actually, it's not about you as a therapist; it's about the person's attention.
If you bring it back to what have they got their attention on, and you can shift that. As I say, it's not about having faith in you, it's having their attention in a useful place.
Brilliant. Once again, Carl, thanks very much. And we look forward to seeing you next week on the Brain Booster.